In this episode 3, I want to talk a bit about human will. I mean, if the one rule to really obey at all times, the one and only law in the universe that exists for us, apart from gravity and such, but I mean behavioral law is don't do harm. What does harm mean? Well, I already pointed it out in the previous episode 2, where I was talking about abortion. Pretty clearly, that is about not violating someone's will. You know, you might say, okay, what if we're violating their emotion instead? Is that fine then? What if we are violating their body? But do they want their body to be violated? No. Do they want their emotion to be violated? No. So, violating their will is ultimately the thing that we have to focus on, or rather, not to, you know? So, and I said something along the lines of everybody wants to rule all of reality. And there's some truth to that. Because, I mean, let's say that everybody would have to adhere to your personal emotion. Everybody in the entire world. And would also do so. You might think, okay, that's not the world I want to live in. Or maybe that's the world I want to live in, but they are going to not like it. But what if you also would have to do that? If everybody would have to do that in regards to everybody else, which is, I believe, even the world that we should live in and should strive to have. But doesn't this mean that when you see, for example, on the news that there is, I don't know, a war going on, and you don't like that, you feel like that should not be, because that's not the way we should exist on this planet. We should actually have overcome that necessity of conflicting wills, ultimately devolving into the most extreme possible way of dissolving that question of who's right, but just, you know, pushing, which is what war is, you know. We should have evolved past that, and but we haven't yet. And what if you feel that should be indeed the case, and then you see that on the news? Are they not violating your emotion by having this war there? Well, who are they then to have this war? This is not something we want. Of course, I'm being a bit, you know, funny about that. But I'm saying that by just feeling that's not something you like, you're implicitly trying to rule reality over there, wherever that war is happening. And the war is just an example. You can use any other example. What if you see someone's face and they chose to have a weird hair color? And I personally don't have a problem with, hey, look at the blue-haired lesbian. Thought, come on. Not only do I not have a problem with lesbians, but also, I mean, to say that blue hair or something like that is in general stupid, that is itself stupid. And if you disagree, then you are stupid. I'm sorry. That's just too simplistic. You're just reducing reality too drastically. Of course, I understand what people mean when they say some blue-haired lesbian when it comes to some left-wing TDS-infested protesters or whatever. Yeah, sure. But I mean, you know. Okay, anyway, if you see someone maybe with a hair color that you don't like, that's you too trying to rule their reality. Of course, no one gives a fuck. But on the other hand, is not the goal to set ourselves free? Is not that what mankind has been trying to achieve from the start? From when the first humans already wanted, basically, they already wanted AI. They already wanted maybe teleportation, if that's a thing. They already wanted autonomous driving. They wanted pornography. They wanted video games. All of that they wanted. They just didn't know it yet. They weren't able to reflect it. But that is all things that they wanted. That is how they've... I mean, see, we are doing these things these days because it satisfies our emotion. And this emotional apparatus fundamentally has always been the same. Only the sophistication in which with which we are reflecting upon it, and also the depth in which this living emotion was capable of expressing itself in the physical body, You know, it's not like we started as functional humans suddenly in evolution. That has changed, but in principle, we always wanted to free our will. And now we have gotten pretty close to that. I mean, we can have machines do our bidding. For example, yesterday, I mean, it's pretty funny. Do I want to talk about AI now or about free will? Both, by the way, but I should make AI an episode of its own. So, but yet yesterday I had AI program an entire application for me, and I had to intervene 1 or 2 times and say, hey, this is wrong and that is missing, and I wanted that instead. But then it did that, and well, now I have a console-based application that will detect whether the Wi-Fi connection is still fine. It does that by checking if a certain website is reachable, a local website on some Internet of Things USB stick. And if that is not reachable, it will make Windows forget this Wi-Fi, as in you would have to select it again and input the password again, and then it will do that for you automatically, and then everything's fine again, until it detects again that this connection is no longer there. And that's a pretty cool application to have, I think. And I think it's not unique. This probably exists already, but you know, I mean, the world is full of good stuff that you could find, but what if... Okay, these days you can just use AI to find that, sure, right. Anyway, I have this now, and I just basically conjured it into existence by expressing my will in words, which is something all of you should try to learn when it comes to AI, because that's the future. Really, it will reformat reality, reformat human civilization on a scale that is completely beyond anything we've ever seen all throughout history. It will have greater impact than all the world wars combined, easily. You can take that to the bank. In other words, if you would be so wise as to invest in artificial intelligence stocks like Nvidia, Tesla, some index that is generally about robotics and so forth, you will make money. That's a certainty. Ideally, you should scale in slowly, and also when the entire market has dipped as fuck, like it currently has, that's a great opportunity to get in, because it's not like the stock itself is now less valuable. It's that the entire market has dropped, and that generally takes basically all the stocks with it. Which means that once the market is out of this artificial depth, out of artificial low that it currently has, these stocks will also go up again. And what do you do when you're betting the stock market? You're betting the future. Well, okay, here you know the future, put money in it, and ride it out and take the win. Anyway, so it's pretty awesome that we can just say, this is my will, do it, machine, and then the machine does that, and yeah, that is where we already at, to some degree at least. And that will increase. Not only because we certainly keep developing that for technological curiosity purposes, but also and the companies that want to make money and they want to be the first one, and that's completely groundbreaking. I mean, we're basically discovering the wheel right now, metaphorically, because artificial intelligence, that's something that exists in the universe as a potential, and we are basically chiseling it out of the monolith of eternity. We are unleashing it. We're finding it. We are delving. We are the dwarves who are delving into the mountain to find the goods, which are there. We are finding them, and that will certainly happen then. So that is about the freeing of our wills, also, right? So now with that in mind, what about personal emotions like I don't like that hair color, or I don't like that war, or whatever kind of example you could come up with, because you have seen that on the internet. There are many angles to look at this. You could, for example, say, well, then don't look at the internet, don't look at Twitter, it's just annoying. Which is, you know, Twitter is a cool thing, but it's also a lot of a waste of time, and yeah, I'm not doing that. So there are many angles. You could say, then just don't look at that. But I mean, you want to be aware. You want to see what's going on in the world. And with that, you will implicitly walk past some information that you don't like. Some circumstance described to you, a circumstance that you want to be different. And since we are basically collectively, globally, on a path of trying to free our will, which is what's really happening, yes. And programming is one of the purest ways of doing that, because you're telling reality, you are now my servant, do the following thing automatically. And that's what I've been preaching so far, where I would have said that everybody will eventually be able to program, because it is so free. And that was just before AI was taking off, when I had this attitude. Now it has taken off, and I realize, well, that's not entirely true. These days we will be using AI for that. Like yesterday, I programmed an application by just telling the AI what I want. So that's implicitly still the same thing, right? I'm saying I'm creating a program that does my bidding, and so yeah, but basically my guesstimation was right. Only the actual execution would not be that you learn the programming language, you just learn the AI, how to deal with them. Anyway, since we are on this path of trying to free our will, should this not mean that we will also consider someone's individual perspective of what should and shouldn't be in the world when they have observed a thing, that we should consider that more? And indeed, that's what we're doing, and that's a very tricky thing, of course, to do. We have to balance that out. For example, I think that free speech is one of the most important things ever. Because we as a people, we think with our brains, of course, but as a collective, we also think, where every person could be seen as a neuron. And that neuron must not be artificially disabled, like it is, for example, definitely in fascist Germany, which is what we have again, and fascist United Kingdom, where the people are prohibited from using their collective brain. Where speech is, where a lot of speech is illegal, and so truth-finding is lopsided, biased, hampered, disabled. That doesn't fly, man. So what if someone feels like you shouldn't be able to say a certain thing? Should we satisfy that emotion? I just expressed, no, definitely not. As long as it's speech that is within the bounds. I mean, the bounds should just be, don't, incite violence, because your speech is an agent, that's why you're speaking basically, that affects the world. And if the effect that you have on the world would be relatively directly that harm would be done, then you shall not speak that. You shall not speak that. And when I'm talking about harm here, I'm talking about physical harm, terrorism, explosion, murder, suicide, stuff like that. Don't. But anything else is fair game. Even including insults, I would say. They should, though, be somewhat grounded. There should be a reason, not someone just tossing out some words, but there should be some substance to it. Why is the person saying that? That is something that should become clear, Otherwise, that's speech that I wouldn't say it should be prohibited, but it should be frowned upon as speech in general. Not a certain opinion to be frowned upon. Opinions are different. I mean, have we found the objective truth yet? I think no. I think the only way to really find the truth is to convince yourself at every turn that you haven't found it yet. The only way to really pursue truth is to keep looking, no matter how close you believe to have approached it so far. But okay, so they are basically mankind is exploring right and wrong, not just by thinking, but also by manifesting, by just doing things and then letting reality do the thinking. Like you push down your hand on the hot plate because you didn't bother to check whether it is hot, and then reality says, well, your hand is now burnt because the plate was indeed hot, and so this external brain that reality is thought that up for you, and now you know the truth of it by manifestation. That's one way to look at it, and that's a way how mankind has been processing facts. Too often in history, we should really use our brains more. I mean, for example, that boundless migration is not something that flies. It doesn't, man. It needs to be limited. Boundless doesn't fly. If you disagree, sorry, you need to rethink that, and if you're not willing to do that, then I think we have already found out where the problem is. So, how did I get there? Yeah, that is something that was pretty clear, yet for some stupid reason, Western nations implemented that anyway, boundlessly, And now we see manifested the answer to that which many of us were already saying, but we will not listen to. Yes, indeed, boundless doesn't fly. It has to be limited. It has to be controlled. You know? And that is an example of mankind using reality to think and then seeing the outcome and understanding, okay, that's what it is then. And an example for we should not do that. We should instead use our own brains. Because, you know, it causes suffering. If you know, is the lion still behind the tree, or has it really vanished? Let's just go there and look. The lion eats you, and then you know. See, that's not the kind of thinking mistake you want to make. So in this way, we are now currently also exploring this concept of how far-reaching should your emotion really be in its control of reality out there in the world? Should people be able to say stuff like transsexuality is insanity and so forth? And maybe at this point I should say that at the end of episode 1 of this podcast, I also was talking about transsexuality, and I was saying that that was definitely a position that was showing an uncritical perspective, one that is non-negative. I'm saying, well, see, I'm talking concepts here mostly. There's not much opinion in here, or if there's an opinion, then I'm talking on higher levels, not on some individual manifestations so much. And so I mentioned this thing about the first episode just now, so that someone listening to me talking about this right here doesn't leap to assumptions as to my position on the matter. You know, just know that you don't know shit. Try to listen to the words I speak, not to the words I don't speak. You know, that would be very helpful. Thank you. So, can a person, for example, say that transsexuals are insane or something like that, in general, you know? Is that something that can be said? Or is J.K. Rowling, who, by the way, never said that transsexuality is bad, she was just ardent on her protection of female rights versus, for example, you know, women's spaces. How are we supposed to deal with that? So, but then the mob mentality came in and loud screaming, and then people had leaned themselves out of the window, so now we can no longer utter that we have reevaluated and have a different opinion now, or maybe we haven't even reevaluated that anyway, and that whole thing was completely off the rails, and it's just sad. That's not how we as a civilization should deal with any matter, no matter what matter that is. No matter if we're talking about I don't know, a gummy bear vending machine or the Holocaust. We should always just be rational about it. Else we're just animals. And animals, well, animals should not have the right to rule the human space. So if someone is being an animal about things, then their opinion is not only without value, but also we must make sure that their opinion or their will doesn't manifest too much, because obviously, you know, animals have to be kept in check. Now let's finally try. Now we're trying to finally try to say the thing I was developing a sentence towards for like 20 minutes already. This consideration of individual emotion in a global space. I think we are on a path to actually consider that and do that, but our first steps to do that were just clumsy, childish, you know. So we just caused some manifestation, and that caused some bad shit, and I guess not everybody agrees that it was bad shit, and some speech should be prohibited is still the position of many, and I really disagree. The truth, reality is the truth, and we have to deal with reality. We have to deal with the truth. We cannot ignore it. We cannot wish it away. And if we could, would we really want to? Because there's still the truth, the reality of our emotion. Would we not feel bad to be in a space that is completely arbitrary? That we have lost the beautiful thing that reality is, this objective space that we all share. Anyway, that's useless because we cannot do that anyway. So we are exploring to try to accommodate the individual emotions in a global space. Like, let everybody rule the entire world with their feelings is kind of this what I detect in there. That's not the way you would phrase that, I guess, except after all the things I said here in this video so far, you might think, okay, maybe that's indeed something that is beginning to develop there. And I think that's exactly what that is. We are trying to expand our implementation of the Golden Rule to finer and finer scales. It's also one of the reasons that I think that we're actually living through the apocalypse, the actual apocalypse these years, because the scales on which we are capable of influencing reality, and the scales on which we are considering our own and every other's emotion is so much higher that that it has such fundamental implications for reality and also for our own decisions, or for the implementation of the Golden Rule. It was easy to implement the Golden Rule when we were just cavemen, basically, because just don't kill, don't steal, and stuff like that, But the more refined we are in our self-perception, and as a civilization communicating our perceptions and how we understand each other to be feeling as beings and to be thinking as beings and so forth, the more complex that becomes. And every once in a while, there's something like an emergence step in the eons-long evolution of human civilization. And we are experiencing one of those these years, where we are elevating emotion itself to be will that needs to be considered. And I think that's right. I think that will and emotion are the same thing. So back on the topic of this, or the core topic of this episode, is will and emotion the same thing? I think yes, because if you have a will that is often based upon rational thinking in your head, or it is based upon whatever, but whatever it is based upon in your head has been built slowly, and it has been built moment by moment, and that building took place based upon the situation you were in, and based upon the mental structures you already had on your identity and all that. But also it took place based upon your emotion. And that, I believe, was ultimately the driver. So if you feel like you want to punch someone in the face as a flash of the moment emotion, and then tell yourself, well, but that's not okay, then you might say, well, obviously my will and my emotion are two separate things now. But no, that's just your will or your emotion, or what you could call it, is not focused. It's not pure. It's not laser-focused unity. It's a cacophony of competing sounds. But you have established as one dominant sound in your head to be a civilized person, or that you actually don't feel good about rashly doing a thing like punching someone. And see, that is still just emotion, only it is crystallized. You have used your emotion to build those long-term, lasting, strong structures in your head, but it's still, whether it's this macroscopic kind of will, or whether it's the microscopic, flimsy, fluent emotion version of it, it's the same thing, only on different scales and different levels of inertia, but it's the same thing. And I think that mankind has become aware of that and is now trying to live up to indeed the emotion of the individual, and not just some on a global scale politics and such, and not just and that's tricky. We are in these new waters where we try to find out how does that work. And so our first decisions are pretty childish, trying to prohibit people's speech. That's ridiculous, man. That's something we must not do. We must stay functional as a truth-finding machine, as a brain, as a global brain that uses its neurons to communicate and ponders different perspectives and different things that you might then toss out. And so someone having some ridiculous opinions or making some ridiculous statements, let them. Someone making insulting statements or statements that would be feeling to be attacking an entire group, let them. Even racism should be fine. Even racist statements. Okay, when I say fine, then I'm talking about information processing. I'm not saying accept it as true. I'm not saying except that when someone says, well, this is... And so, see, the problem is as follows. For example, in the United States, the official statistics of the government bodies speak... I will just try to keep this neutral, but speak of a certain racial group to be significantly more violent in the crime statistic. I mean, significantly more. I'm talking really about something that is so significantly stronger that this cannot just be a racial bias thing. It must be, maybe it can be a racial bias-based circumstance thing. Like the circumstances cause that, and those circumstances in turn are caused by racism, whatever. But ultimately, it's not like the statistics themselves are just racially biased. That's not what that is. The scale is just too vast. And that's something that people these days maybe are talking about, but like 10 or so years ago, not. They were, maybe they're still not talking about it, I don't know. But I think it is more spoken about these years, I believe. But 10 or so years ago, not. But that is something that should be talked about. That needs to be solved. It's a real thing in the world. It is something that affects reality. It's something that affects humans directly, and that needs to be solved, man. And so we must be able to ponder that. And I'm using this not to talk about racism, but to talk about what I have already made clear sufficiently, I believe, that we, as a collective brain, must be allowed to process information. Else things will go off the rails, which they have, incidentally. When we were not allowed to say, well, immigration needs to be limited and so forth, that was also then punted into the ground with statements like, that's racist, and so forth. And that ultimately stifled the functionality of the collective brain. And now, well, now we're seeing with deep pain that those thoughts would have been right, and now we have to do something about it. That could have been avoided. So free speech, and thus also accepting the violation of emotions, must be the top value that we hold. Because truth must be the top value that we hold, and thus free information processing must be among the top values that we hold. That's pretty clear, isn't it? I done goofed. Fuck off already. So, the boundaries of will. When I'm calling it that, am I saying that your will is as big as the universe? I think the problem is how we would then have to think about will. I mean, are we talking a phenomenon, a physical force, or whatever? I think that doesn't work. I think boundaries of will here in this podcast should rather mean how far should our consideration of your will/emotion go? And that is what mankind has now begun to ponder, and I hope the answers will be good. I will observe this with a close eye, and I will talk about this, of course, every once in a while when some new emergent steps have been found. So, I think I should stop this episode now because I believe I have run out of steam. But have come up with a few things that I definitely want to talk about that just don't fit this episode. And so let's put that in different ones. Will you come up already? Oh, I believe the problem is that there are some lights here that belong here, or some other stuff. I don't know. Anyway, okay, see you next time.